Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Hayleigh Bosher. I am a copyright scholar, which sounds really boring, but I promise make it as fun as possible. I wrote a book called Copyright in the Music Industry, and basically I'm really interested in rights and the laws and regulations around music. And in particular I've done some work around how that applies to emerging technologies and new revenue streams. So I come at this conversation from also a slightly skeptical legal nature, so I'll be asking some difficult questions. Also, you can ask questions too. Yeah, please do that. We'll get to that later. So, if we'll go down the panel, everyone will introduce themselves, there'll be a short presentation, and then we'll have a conversation, and then there'll be time for questions. Okay?
Thank you, Hayleigh. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're really excited to be here. It's only my third time in Sheffield, but we're actually from London. Jay here is from London, born and bred. I'm a Yorkshire lad, but I can't say born and bred anymore because I spent most of my time in London. My name is Banton. I'm a part of the duo.
So I'm Jay Udo-Udoma, also known as Jay Tronica, not Jay Electronica. It's a slight difference. Ayo and I are part, or we complete the multidisciplinary, multisensory artistic duo Polygon 8. I'll hand it over to Des.
Thank you. So my name is Des. I'm a co-founder of Sega World, which is a Web3 creative agency where we onboard talent and brands into the Web3 space. As you can see, I'm sporting a Binance t-shirt because I'm a UK Binance angel, because I was quite fortunate to be one of the first UK users of Binance in the summer of 2017. And I'm also following the footsteps of Hayleigh of trying to complete my PhD in remuneration rights for artists. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
There is nothing casual about PhD, I can assure you, so fair play. So you have a presentation, do you want to kick off with that?
Should we do that? I think...
Or should we do some initial... Let's get everybody on board with, in case you don't know what an NFT is, and it's fine if you don't. Who wants to take the first question and explain to the audience in very simple terms what is an NFT?
I can do it, I don't mind. We'll double check it. You start.
Okay, then fair enough. For starters, does anybody know what fungible means?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. I mean, the best way I like to describe it is give an example of what, if something is fungible, what that is. So a pound coin, that is fungible. So basically it means that the value of something that you trade stays the same. So I can go to Tesco's, take my pound coin from my wallet, buy a bottle of water, I can use that pound and then trade it with Hayleigh. It's the same value of exchange every single time. Now when something is non-fungible, it comes down to the value which the market decides to put on it. So the example I like to use is like Pokemon cards. So you've got guys like JME, Logan Paul, who will happily go and spend £25,000 on a shiny Charizard. For me, it's toilet paper. It's absolutely worthless. But so that's what non-fungible is. But the thing is like, I feel like with the term NFTs, by the time it gets to its final form, we're not going to be talking about NFTs. I mean, if I was to say to you, what's the code that is used to create the internet? Does anybody know? Yeah. It's HTTP. Yeah. But you don't care about that, you just care about getting onto Instagram and like surfing the websites and stuff. It's going to be exactly the same concept for the use of this type of technology, but obviously because we're still very early on, this is why like obviously all of these different codes, like what NFT is, what the DAO is, and all of that is yeah, can seem quite scary. But yeah, feel free to pick up if I...
Yeah, I think a good way of looking at it is differentiating between what an NFT is and what an NFT can be used to represent. And that's where sometimes there's quite a massive disparity between what people think and what actually really there is. On top of that, as you were saying in terms of the market actually deciding the value of something, or market forces, obviously whether that's supply, demand, so on and so forth, simple Keynesian economics, can also change the way people view specific tokens, whether that's Bitcoin, if you're looking at cryptocurrencies, if you're looking at stable coins as well, and of course if you're looking at other types of tokens like, what's it called again? Any kind of token that you can use in a situation to represent something, whether that's financial or whether that's a physical item. One thing that I think Ayo and I are definitely quite keen on looking at, especially with NFTs and the way they intersect with music and art, is whether you can actually create something digital but also have it to represent something that's physical. And one of the biggest problems that we have right now in the world is that, exactly what you were saying, Des, is when someone says the word NFT, there's actually a public face of what people think that is. And that isn't necessarily completely all-encompassing to what an NFT could be.
Yeah, I like that. It's also the same from the legal perspective, because in some ways we do care about what it technically is, because that's how we'll regulate it. Currently unsure what that will look like. But ultimately, which is my next question, we're talking about it really abstractly. Can you give us an example of an actual NFT? And when you're talking about the example, for people who might be thinking about maybe looking into this, like, why would we care? What does this mean for a composer, for example?
Okay, I think the best way to explain what an NFT is from a music and a, I suppose, entertainment point of view, because there's one thing from an art point of view. So if you think about things like Bored Apes, which I'm sure everybody knows about, the NFT itself, the token itself, is a representation of a cartoon ape. But the value isn't just in the NFT itself, it's also in what that allows you to do, whether there's any smart contracts written into that, or whether that allows you to do certain things that whoever owns that NFT, or whether it's minted on a specific platform that gives you certain access to certain things, that might be events, so on and so forth, that all that value is contained within the NFT at the point of sale. However, because it's non-fungible, that can all be changed realistically, unless it's written into it as a smart contract. So with certain, which might sound complicated, but the best way to explain that would be to, I suppose, give you a simple example. If a fashion brand like Prada was going to sell a bag, they give you the bag, and that's all the bag gets you. The money you bought, you spent on the bag has got you a bag. But if you were to turn that bag into an NFT itself, they could then include certain things in the purchase of that bag, like access to Prada launches, fashion events, so on and so forth. You still have the bag, but the bag itself is a token that represents those things as well. And I think that's the opportunity when it comes to music. So, for example, in the past, when you released a song or a track or whatever, you would be able to do that mostly, especially before the internet, through record labels. And the record labels would get you to come in, you'd go to the studio, you'd record the song, and then they would own the master, the physical pressing of that. They then, or between them and you, there'd be a copyright sort of situation, a publishing situation. Then that can actually allow you to make those copies and sell those. And depending on who makes those copies and who pays for that, paid all the sort of costs of that off, you then have royalties that you collect and split between you and the record label. Fundamentally, if your fan buys that CD, it in itself is just a CD. So you've got music on it, there might be some extra things on there like, I don't know, lyrics or whatever, but there's no added value that you can gain unless it's a limited edition run, so on and so forth. Whereas if, which is very possible to do now, if you were to release the track itself as an NFT, you can have other value added into it. So it could be a case where artists who didn't want to go through a record label could use that to raise finance. People could specifically buy a certain amount of those tracks. But the other thing is that once they've sold that track, it's not a case of selling someone the ability to listen to it. If it's as an NFT itself, the person now owns that specific track. They can now, if they're allowed to by the artist, monetize that. They could release it, they can copy it, they can do whatever they want with it, they can put it onto a music video and promote it themselves. Whereas with an original piece of music if you sold it with a CD or whatever, unless you're the artist or unless you're in the copyright, you're not able to do that. So what NFTs do is it gives us an opportunity to support artists in a way that's never happened before. But as we're going to show with some of the projects that we've been working on, there's a way to incentivize fans to really get closer to an artist or to engage with an artist in ways that they've never been able to do.
So what I'm hearing from you is why we would care about NFTs is that it's a new way to be creative and create an experience with your art rather than just maybe singular, and potentially a new revenue stream.
Yes. There's more to it.
Yeah.
So can I say one more thing?
Yeah, go on.
So the other side of this that we haven't really spoken about is the blockchain. And that's also important because when you mint an NFT, you specifically choose a blockchain to mint it on. Now, what blockchains allow you to do is, A, in terms of authenticity, in terms of reliability, and in terms of actually being able to track sales of a specific item. It allows you to do that in a way that you'll never ever be able to do with, I don't know, even if you look up stolen art from the African diaspora or whatever, there's no way you can figure out who did this and who did that. You've got people that will tell you what they say, or you might have records that were written. Those can easily be forged. Whereas a blockchain, unless you've got a quantum computer, it's very, very difficult to do that.
And the super exciting thing about NFTs, I started out as a photographer. Still I'm a photographer, lens-based media. But that was the exciting thing, because NFTs now allowed creatives to be multifaceted. So now we have our genre, so whether even if you're a filmmaker, a writer, or whatever you are, you now can take that content to the next level. And that was the exciting thing about NFTs. It's allowing us to be multifaceted in their approach. So as a photographer, hold on a minute, I can create a piece of work that sits on the blockchain, that is also, I can program the artwork. So the artwork doesn't exist from a photographer still, or from a videographer video. It can change over time. This, for us, is super exciting. So our genre changed overnight. And in fact, the projects we got changed overnight. Because NFT allowed us to be able to access the avenues that we couldn't necessarily access before. And that's, for me, a simple way to explain what an NFT is, but what it allows you to do. So whether you're a photographer, a writer, a videographer, whatever creativity you are in, see it as a new opportunity. And also, for us, it democratized. The fine art sector, in my opinion, was a closed shop. It was a closed shop. If I wanted just to spring into a major gallery or to a gallery space, it was problematic. It was held by, in my opinion, an elite organization. And it had your do's and your don'ts, and you could only join if you like this. But this allowed anyone with an ounce of creativity in their blood to access. And for me, and for us, that has democratized the industry. So whatever negativity you hear about NFTs, in a sense, it disrupted that formula. And that's the simplest way I can explain what an NFT is and what it does.
I think as well, jumping into what you've just said and sort of elevating that, there's always going to be, whenever there's any new development in any industry or any sort of place of work or anything, there's always going to be naysayers, there's always going to be people that push against that. In the world of art, every generation there's always been a new type of art, there's always been something that the previous art world and gatekeepers have always said isn't real art. I mean, if you go back to when Andre Breton was writing the Surrealist Manifesto, and they were all creating these salons of the art they were making that wasn't getting into the institutes, and they were selling their art in markets and so on and so forth outside on the streets of Paris. If you'd spoken to anyone at the Grand Salons or even at the Institute, so places like La Nuit Blanche or the Institute of Art in Paris, they would have ridiculed at the concept that a Monet or any of those kind of guys would be seen as high art, because at that time it wasn't at all. In the same way, when Andy Warhol and all the new pop art generation were making their art. Even if you look at Jean-Michel Basquiat, he was laughed at by a lot of the institutes. Yet here we are now, looking at artists like him, artists like Klimt, and their art selling for 20, 40, 60 million pounds. So it's fundamentally always going to be at the audience's behest what art really is.
Yeah, I really like what you said there. It's an interesting way of thinking about it. I mean, from my perspective, I care mostly about the creator rights and them making informed decisions. So we'll get on to the challenges and risks shortly. But this is a good way to segue into what I was going to ask you, Des, about, so we're talking about the opportunities and the kind of new, like you're saying about whether there are audiences for this. So what's the current market like? Where are we at? And what kind of are we seeing in this area, especially from musicians and composers maybe?
Well, it depends. So there's, if you want to be able to buy NFTs, the main marketplace is OpenSea, which is essentially like your eBay, like anything kind of goes. And to put into perspective with the amount of revenue that has been generated on OpenSea, there was, I think, when it first started in 2019, it only generated $8.3 million for the entire year. Now, if you compare that to the first 11 days of this year, they were able to generate, I think it was about $12 billion of revenue. And so there is a lot of people with, obviously, who are more crypto native than fans, who are obviously wanted to kind of get involved and purchase NFTs. But that's not to say that there's there's a chance for it to evolve. So everyday users will be able to get involved. And so that's obviously what we've been doing a lot in Soga and the campaigns we've been doing within the music industry. But at the moment, it's very much crypto-centric, crypto pros, as they like to call themselves. They're the ones who are kind of driving that market, that value, but there is now starting to be a drive of everyday users coming into the space and buying NFTs without using crypto, but using credit cards at a low entry point as well, which is really exciting.
And can you give us like a specific example maybe of a successful NFT campaign?
Yeah, there's loads. So I'll do shameless plug. So we went and recently did, well, if I talk about the most recent one that we went and worked with Neo, the US singer, last week on his UK tour, and so we went and sold NFTs to his fans. And that's the one thing with NFTs, it basically it enhances that experience between fans and the artist. It creates that deeper bond, and that was really beautiful to see firsthand. So Neo was performing in Wembley, and we went and sold NFT tickets, and they were very affordable. The fans were able to buy it, and as part of that experience, they were able to basically get the best seat in the house, which was basically getting to watch him during sound check. We went and got a row of chairs, and it was literally his fans. There was about like 25 of them, and him, and he was like interacting with them, saying, "Oh yeah, so guys, what songs do you want to listen to?" And he was like, they were like, "Oh, Sexy Love. All right, guys, 1, 2, 3," and he started playing it. You're like, you know, this is what it's like to own a fan NFT, and that was really great. So that was very successful, and then obviously they got to do like a meet and greet afterwards and entrance into the show and stuff like that. But then on the other side, we went and worked with the rapper H, and we went and did the first NFT project to hit the UK official album charts, which I was really proud of. And again, that was, we obviously had to work with the label Capital, his management NQ, and the official chart company as well. And we were able to create NFTs, which were basically a bundle. So you can buy like the image of the artwork, and then as a result of buying that NFT, then you also got the physical album as well. And so that was another great use case that we were able to do just recently.
Interesting. So, just playing devil's advocate, Why, in those scenarios, can you explain the difference between just buying a ticket and the kind of what the NFT, the role that the NFT plays in the selling of that package?
Yeah, sure. So with the non-fungible ticket, the importance of that was that obviously within the music industry, this ticket touting is a massive issue, and it's been plaguing the industry for years. And we went and did the first NFT music ticketed event last year with these piano artists called Major League DJs, and we went and sold out their headline show in London. And with that experience, it was interesting because we went and collaborated with these guys called Get Protocol, and we basically created an app where the ticket was a QR code, which changed every 5 seconds. And so what that meant was that because the ticket was on the blockchain, it was immutable, so everybody could see who owns it. Whereas right now, the current ticket system, you can't really unless you have ownership of the platform. Secondly, it got rid of fraud, it got rid of scalping, and so it meant that it was fair for everybody and anyone to use. And and again, I thought it was really exciting that when we were going around scanning all those tickets, the technology that we were able to use off the back of that was we created a wallet for absolutely everyone. And so we were then able to airdrop them. So airdropping is basically where you give gifts, like a free gift. And so we were basically able to airdrop all the fans who had an NFT ticket, the set list from that event, the playlists as well, and also pictures from that night. And so it's not just, again, as I was saying before, it's not just about the, it's a ticket, how's that different? It's the experiences and everything that comes with the use of the technology, which is really exciting.
Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think this might be a good point for us to do our presentation.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Take it away.
So, do you want to, in terms of the Youngblood thing? Yeah. Because then, it makes sense. Okay. Oh, it's only half screen. Okay, so, do you want to talk about Polygon in general, and then we'll come to the Youngblood?
Before you, but I think what Des says is incredible.
Yeah.
And it's a really good example of the democratization of art and art form in itself, which allows us to do multiple things, which allows us to disrupt the existing industry, which allows us for you as a creative to go beyond the realms of your own art form. And I think what Des has talked about is it's how the uses of this art form, but also we need to look at it not just for art. It can be used in. I believe the NHS wants to look at smart contracts.
They already are. They're using their hash graph.
It's fantastic. So, and the journey from doing NFTs has our projects have just quadrupled because this art form allows us to do so many things, which allows, if you've got clients or if you've got people you want to work with, you to offer. Yeah. If you're a musician, what do you offer? How do you go beyond the realms of what you did yesterday?
And I think the other thing, before we get into this, about what Des was saying, is that it actually also, a lot of times we're looking at it from how is it benefiting the fan, how is it benefiting the fan? But from the artist's point of view, it's a way of generating revenue, which beforehand, a lot of the revenue options and opportunities that the artists had, especially when it came to things like touring, so on and so forth, have now more and more been taken up by the labels, which I don't know if some of our clients would like us to say, but the labels are now doing 360 deals where they're getting the artists touring, they're getting their merchandise, all that sort of stuff. So as a young up-and-coming artist, obviously for your Adele's, Rihanna's, they own that stuff, and they've got massive rights deals with all kinds of companies. But if you're a new artist starting out, the record label normally owns all that stuff, and there's less and less opportunities for you, traditionally, to make money. So what the NFT, I suppose, the digitally native world allows you to do is find other avenues that A, won't be covered by those contracts, and B, will allow you to engage with your fans in a more direct manner that allows them to actually pay you directly, and thus allows you to generate more revenue.
So, well, let's talk about the art itself, and whatever you do, whatever genre you've chosen. is to be immersed in it. So it then started to get us to think about anything we've done. So in 2004, I was in the 2004 tsunami, and I saw things you don't want to think you've seen. It was horrific. But years later, when I started experimenting with NFTs, I thought, hold on a minute, how do I recreate that experience? How do I recreate it as a piece of work that taps into that whole experience? So what we started doing is we were sending sound waves. We were working with sound waves. We sent sound waves into water. We then would, those sound waves then could create what you call primordial sounds. The primordial sounds is the sound if you walk down the street and you hear a river flowing, that's a primordial sound. Or if you listen to your heartbeat, put your hand on your heart, that's a primordial sound. So we were fascinated by how we could create these natural forms that are found in nature. How do we create them? And one of the ways to do that is to shoot the sound waves through water. And those geometrical shapes in the water are the most beautiful shapes you could ever imagine. So we started shooting these things and photographing these geometrical shapes in water. And it gave us visuals like this, assisted with AI, which was able to read them as binary code, which were able to then create these amazing pieces of work. So, and then they don't stop there. Then we craft that and we said, you know what, let's put this on the blockchain. Let's share this with our community. So this is another good reason why NFTs and why we were drawn to this new process of working.
Yeah, I'm going to fast forward to this. So, this is a good case study in terms of what the use of NFTs for a music artist. If you want to explain how we came about the project, in terms of what inspired us to work on this with Dom, and then I'll explain about the intricacies of the project itself.
So again, there are also very good commercial possibilities. So we start with concepts first. The concept, what's the idea? What's the thing? One of the things we're working with is that idea of who are you? Identity. Who are we? And we started to think about how you're seen in society, how you're represented, and how do you express your multifacetedness. How do you express that? And one of the things with this particular artist, and he has a particular take on not being seen as one thing, not being seen as one identity. So I thought about that, and I thought about Englishness, and we just decided to create this idea, or called the English Rose. And if you know what an English Rose is, and the way that if you actually Google now the English Rose, you'll see Keira Knightley, Lady Diana, and that's the image of an English Rose. So we wanted to disrupt that and turn that on its head. Anyone could be the English Rose. Anyone. So we created this whole concept and we took it to the record label and they absolutely loved it. They were like, this is brilliant for us. Obviously it has good commercial interest with them on merch, on all these different things. But it also is an interesting piece. Also great for the fans who want to collect an NFT, who are huge fans of someone like Youngblood. So I'll let Jay explain to you the technical
side. So one of the things that we wanted to address, and it's one of my and Aya's main things, that we always want to create a combination of physical and digital. We always look at how we can bridge that gap, but also as digital natives, we want to always bring more people into the digital world towards NFTs that normally wouldn't be able to or wouldn't be comfortable in that space. So the first thing we did when we were looking at this whole concept was we made sure that we were able to facilitate people being able to purchase NFTs without having cryptocurrency. So to move on from what Des was saying is that the new element of Web3, which I might have to explain later, and where the metaverse is going, is it has to be able to accommodate everybody. It has to be able to accommodate people that might not understand the difference between what ETH or Ethereum is. And so we made sure that for them to buy the NFT or even to access the NFT, you didn't have to have a wallet. So it's probably a similar situation where a wallet would be created for them, and automatically they have a wallet and an opportunity to collect NFTs without even necessarily knowing it. Because for the fans' point of view, most fans of Youngblood, they're not necessarily NFT or digital natives, but they want the artwork, or they want the t-shirt, or so on and so forth. On top of that, we've got systems now with our partners. We're partnered with the Palm Network, which is our blockchain of choice, and we are currently their, I suppose, faces. We're the face of Palm in terms of their artistic output anyway. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure with our blockchain was that it wasn't environmentally harmful. So the gas fee, there's hardly any minting fees. It's very, very light in terms of the amount of gas it uses, or fuel it uses, let's say, because we're not in America. And we also wanted to have a multi-use platform that allowed people to collect multiple things. So with this, which I can't show you now because the other presentation we couldn't get to work, people will get an NFT, which will be specifically based on the song that they like by the artist. They will also be able to turn that into a t-shirt, which they can either wear on an avatar in places like Decentraland, so on and so forth, in the metaverse, or they could even have it on an avatar on their Facebook profile or whatever it is. They'll also be able to get access to secret shows, meet and greets, so on and so forth. Plus, there's other things as well, artwork, as well as special songs, special versions of the song, and so on and so forth, that they're going to be able to actually purchase or get airdrops, like Des was saying. And this is one of the sort of examples of what's possible with an NFT for a musician, because obviously there's different types, but that's what we're speaking about today.
Yeah, I love it. I think there are, and this is just one example, right? So there's loads of different things that you can do, and like Des said earlier, it can be a combination of, say, digital art or digital merchandise, but also in things in real life, like an actual vinyl or an actual ticket to a concert or something. My next question, you've given us different examples which relate to different artists, performers, songwriters that we have heard of. Do you think this is working for particular genres of music more than others? Like, if people in the audience are thinking, like, would this actually work for me? Because, Des, you mentioned Age. Another, you may have heard, like, Muse also did #1 album that included some NFT sales. And when I heard of Muse doing it, I was kind of like, I get it. Like, they're really always been quite future tech vibe. I can imagine their fan base being super into that. H, I was a bit like, oh, interesting. Wasn't expecting that. So what are your views about like genre and fan bases in terms of, like, is this for everyone, or is this where you've already got a fan base and your fan base is particularly interested in this kind of stuff?
Yeah, sure. Yes, this definitely is for everyone. So, I mean, so that physical and digital, like they call it phygital, that experience it's not limited to a genre.
What do they call it?
Phygital.
Phygital, love that.
That experience isn't limited to a genre, so anybody can do it. And you're starting to see, again, like, I just want to reiterate, it's the use of the technology is about building deeper connections with your community. So as long as you've got a community, anybody can be able to use the tech. So, like, initially it stemmed from the dance space, because obviously you've got the likes of it's gone out of my head now, like Steve Aoki and Marshmello and all of those guys, because I guess it's like the tech and dance kind of makes sense. But then what you started to see is started to kind of infiltrate like the urban community, because naturally, like, a lot of black culture is all about like earning your masters and being your own boss, and so this kind of sits very nicely. And then now what you start to see is, like, obviously, like the conversations I was having with major labels about getting involved in the space about 2 years ago has completely changed to how it is now, where they're now a lot more open and they're willing to just experiment, but specifically around the communities who are a lot more receptive. Because just because this technology is there doesn't mean it's for everyone. Like, people get it at this moment in time. And so it's about being able to, one, make sure that if you are going to be doing a campaign, regardless of genre, it actually speaks to your audience initially more than anything, rather than just saying, oh, you know what, I'm just going to do an NFT because I want to get a cash grab, which has been a massive issue in this space.
I mean, yeah, you're exactly right there. The truth is, as long as you look at what your fan base or your audience is, then you can figure out which ways to bring NFTs in. Because just because the fan base might not necessarily understand or gel with NFTs doesn't mean that there's no place for them. So I've got a specific project that we're going to talk about now, which will showcase that. So this is slightly outside music, but it's also recorded history, and it actually goes back to what the last conversation was on, which is archiving. Now, there's no way that anybody would have thought, may she may her soul rest in peace, Her Royal Highness the Queen would be something that we would be able, or the royal family would be an organisation that we're working with when it comes to an NFT. But just to show how wide and varied the opportunities are and who is actually interested in, I'm going to once again let my creative partner, who is the artist in residence at the EMI Archive Trust, that's this guy over here, talk about how this piece came about, how in fact the story of what got us to the point where we were going to make a Queen NFT for Queen Elizabeth, who unfortunately has passed away, and how it was relevant, why it was relevant, and also then I'll then do the technical part.
So quickly, I just want to get through this one pretty fast. So we were given an amazing opportunity through EMI, who created the first microphone. So the first microphone was created with EMI, and the Queen had used this microphone, and the Queen's household had asked EMI, in celebration of this microphone, we'd like to create, could you create a piece of artwork? So then, because I was the artist in residence, they said, are you prepared to make a piece of artwork about the Queen? So I had a deep swallow. But go back to my history, back in Leeds, growing up as a young boy, my community, I was really strong, very strong, powerful, working-class community. One thing that they did was all the time celebrate Jubilees. And as a child, you were always part of that. No child was ever left out of that. So I grew up remembering the Jubilee, even though it might sound like a contradiction, as some of the more happiest times of my life. And in fact, I can revisit those experiences. I'm always smiling because, you know, it was partying, we were all around the table, we were kids. It was incredible. Parents prepared all this stuff for us.
Coronation chicken sandwiches.
Yes. So I cannot divorce the happiness I had from that childhood. So every time I think of the royal family, I think of happiness. And I can go back to that time. So when they asked me, I said, you know what? We'll do it. We'll do it. But we'll only in the condition you let us do it our way. So they gave us the microphone, which is this incredible crafted piece of, which was the main motivation, because it had affected everyone in terms of sound, music. It affected from the 20th century, this microphone. So she gave a speech with this microphone, so we thought, you know what, we'll use this within the artwork. And for us, we went to revisit what her favourite plants were, so we put that inside the piece, and it had to feature her, but we had to mix the genres. It couldn't be just photography. It had to be photography, it had to be digital art, it had to be video. We've actually got a video piece here, but you won't see this today. And we blended the genres together. So this was the background for creating this piece of art. Also, it's a historical moment. How many often do someone tap you on the shoulder and say, are you prepared to make a piece of artwork for the Queen? And an NFT at that. So I couldn't say no. And then, Jay, if you take it from there.
Okay, so the reason I brought this up in terms of NFTs and the way they are relevant to sound recording artists is that a lot of people don't know the royal family are actually an artist, and they are published by EMI. So anytime you want to use any piece of film or sound recording with a royal family member on it, you have to get permission from the royal family and from EMI to actually do that. So this is technically an NFT that is also a published sound or music piece, basically. And going back to what Io said, is that because the Marconi microphones, which is the specific microphone in question, and the King George IV microphone, which is up there by Her Royal Highness, was such an integral part of sound, how it then developed, and also how music artists were able to then start recording and sell their music. We thought it was only right to actually harness that and get something or some piece of recording that we could have with the Queen, which unfortunately, if I'd have known we had sound capabilities here, I would have also had an actual way of showcasing this. But what we did was we actually captured that speech. So it's the first time Princess Elizabeth, as she was back then, had addressed the nation. It was during the war. And the story, there's an unbelievable story to this. So there was a school in Hayes, which was near the EMI factory at the time. And they wrote a letter to King George. The headmaster had found that some of the kids were a bit depressed. Obviously it was wartime, as you would be. And they wondered if the king would give a speech to the nation because they felt it would improve morale. Now, unfortunately, the letter got sent back to the headmaster because the royal secretaries were like, the king doesn't really open letters from the public. But if you send it to the education secretary or the minister of education, he could then have a word with the king and then they could see what could happen. So the headmaster did that, and the Minister of Education was like, this is a great idea. Took it to the king. He was like, this is a great idea. Actually, you know what? We've just got these microphones that have been commissioned, and we're sort of looking at how we can involve technology, because the royal family back then would never be outwardly shown to support any new technology, just in case it didn't work out. And it was a good idea for the king to address the nation, because before that, during war, he'd only addressed the troops, not the nation. And he thought, as it was a bunch of young children that had read the letter to him, it would be a good idea if his daughters also didn't address. And so as a result, Princess Elizabeth and her sister made an address to the public. So we then decided, instead of just having the Queen's voice in this piece, we were also going to get the school from where the letter was also sent from, to have a bunch of kids write their own letters and say them. We've got this all recorded, and we're going to put it together as part of an NFT that we could then present to the Queen with the voices of all those people talking about how she's influenced them, and also to remind her of what it was like when she was their age. So you had her, it was a conversation. And so the piece is actually called Letter to the Queen. So it's her talking to the nation and the nation talking back to her, which was then embedded on a bed of butterflies. So the butterflies actually move, and we've got floral pieces, and I think there's, what are they? Bluebells. That actually sway the wind. So that also had found sounds, and we also recorded sound of actual bluebells swaying in the wind, and so on and so forth. So all that's put together, and this whole piece was presented, well, should have been presented, unfortunately it hasn't been yet, to Her Majesty on an iPad with everything embedded in it, plus the actual prints, as well as all the children's, we filmed all of them as well.
Yeah. So just quickly, to let everyone know as well, so Bob Dylan's son has an NFT platform in LA, the most amazing thing, and it's all about archival. It's all about memory. So they contacted us and said, we'd like to host the platform, host the NFT, because this essentially is about memory. From when I was a child, from Jay's experience, from the floral pieces, tributes, flowers of the fragility of life. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So the NFT allows us to have this new way of storytelling.
Yeah. And it also meant that it wasn't just the artist, as in the royal family, but you could also have community involved as well. And that's the thing that NFTs allow that necessarily a lot of forms of art might not have allowed in the past. This was able to be a piece of work that we did. Technically, the Queen also did, but also 60 children from Hayes were also able to contribute to something that isn't just a piece of art, but it's also a piece of history.
But it's also a nod to collectibles. You remember when we were young and we collect memorabilia. It's also a nod to that. How do we recreate that? The way we collected things is a digital asset. How do you do that? And then put it out to the masses. The dream would be to create something that millions of people collected, because that's how we did it. We used to have the mugs, the cups, the little things, and it was a nod to that as well.
Thank you. That's really interesting. I love this story behind it, which kind of speaks to what you've been saying about creating an experience, and that's really the value of the NFT rather than the technology itself. So we're nearly coming to time, and I have questions, and people have questions.
By the way.
So let's do other people's questions first, because I'll just steal the show. Are there any stats about how successful or effective the chart-compliant NFT release was from H? And then also Muse, if you happen to know any of those.
Yeah, I know that so obviously H, he came in number 2, which was great because we went and beat Madonna, but then we lost out to Steps. So Steps, absolute bangers, by the way.
There you go.
Yeah, but yeah, so with that one, we went and sold about 500 NFTs for him. And then with the Muse one, I know that was, like we were mentioning, I think it was like 1.something% of the total sales. So they were able to sell, I think it was like 1,000 NFTs, but the total sale was like, they sold about 50,000 tickets, albums, which were in a bundle or so something along those lines.
Yeah, so the point was that Muse were number 1 with an album that was also available as an NFT, but and it counted towards their chart ranking, but it was only 1% of the sales. So they sold 50,000 non-NFT albums, and then 1%, or 1% of that 50,000, something like that. So it was relatively small, but it was also, these are the first 2 times it's been charted, so...
Yeah, I mean, just that idea of obviously NFTs that count towards charts. I mean, having to work with the OCC, the official chart company, and they have like this 200-page rule book of what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And just the main idea was if there was an experience that kind of gamified it or tricked your fans into buying more of the album, or there was an experience that took away from the music, then it wasn't allowed. And so they gave me the example of BTS. Now BTS obviously are that massive K-pop band where there's about 50 of them. And what the management company do, obviously it's like Big Hype Machine or whatnot, they will sell an album with each of the band members' face on the front of it. So it's gamifying it where people are not buying it for the music, they're buying it for the art piece at the front. That's not allowed. And even if we were to do like the H thing where you would attach an experience where it's like a meet and greet, people are going to buy it in order to meet the artist, so it takes away from the music. And so that was the main thing to kind of take away from that when working with the OCC. Like if anything was to take away from music, it's not going to be chart eligible. And so it has to be a very clean drop.
Fair enough. And also they do change those rules sometimes, don't they? So we'll see. Next question is, can you change an NFT after you have bought it? And also, do we want to talk a bit about resale rights?
It depends.
Yeah, exactly.
It does depend. That was going to be my answer to lawyer answer.
I mean, okay, so there's multiple ways of looking at the token itself. So the first thing you could do is, as I was saying, is you can actually have programmable NFTs that can change after the point of sale. So you can actually program NFTs to self-destruct if they're then resold. You can do that. You can get them to decay every time they're resold, so like a bit of it falls off. Or, I mean, if you look at, I don't know if anybody knows who Kaiju Kings are, they've got these little Godzilla-looking NFTs called Kaijus, and every time they're either resold or they are processed, they create a bit of mutant goo, God forgive me, that then eventually turn into other NFTs. So they have like, they spawn their own NFTs. So there's all kinds of things, there's no hard and fast rules, A. However, you can write smart contracts into the NFTs to stop people from doing other things with them. So if you as an artist want other people to resell your NFTs, you can allow them to do that. But if you don't want them, you can stop them from doing that as well. So I think that's one thing. However, in terms of as the non-creator, if you are then going to change the NFT, once again, if the artist gives you the opportunity to, you can, but if they don't, you can't.
Right, so you can change the NFT depending on if the person who created the NFT gives you permission to do so
Yes.
or not.
Also,
Yeah.
it depends. So it depends on whether or not you mint the NFT on-chain or off-chain.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the issues at the moment is that when you're creating a smart contract where it's the information that you kind of put, where the information that basically tells you what that NFT is, if you create it on-chain and it's been minted, you can't change it. And so it's like there forever. Now, if you create it and then the information isn't on-chain, it's off-chain in the sense where there's a link that basically says, all the information is stored on this website, you can easily go in and out of and change that website. And so you have these things called rugs, where people think they're buying an NFT, but the truth is they're buying something else.
Right, so it depends on permission and also the technically if it's possible.
And then I can put another caveat into that as well,
Right.
is you can use a chain bridge to take it off a specific chain, put it on another chain, and then you can write other smart contracts into it as well.
It's getting very technical. Let's get
it's
into
kind
it.
of-
Depends.
It depends.
But just quick on the creative point, also allows you, because for instance with the Queen piece, we knew she might pass, we just knew it. So do you create a piece of work that then evolves, that speaks to that? Because if it's a homage, but now she's gone, what else do you do? And also, you know, we have these marvelous people up here before talking about archival and filling in the gaps. Brilliant opportunity to retell your story, reshape your story. It's a fantastic opportunity, especially for archival content. How do we then take that content and make it say something else? Brilliant opportunity to change.
There's also rights angle. So obviously if you've created something, you, in theory, own the rights to it if you haven't signed it or licensed it right away. And so that's where the permission element comes from. So you have rights in your work. Like say you create a work and it's not an NFT, you have the right to say if someone changes it, sells it, does anything with it, that's called copyright or moral rights or performance rights. And those would apply to work that you can package in an NFT. Go on.
Yes. However,
Yeah.
you can also give, so depending on whether you are using an interpolation of that work or if you're selling the work itself. So for example, as a musician, I could sell you the actual piece of work as an NFT, and then it's yours. You own the copyright now. You can now decide on.
It's called an assignment.
Yeah.
I'm doing that thing like on a radio advert where I like put the terms and conditions at the bottom.
Yes. So I could do that,
Yeah.
but I could choose not to. In the same way, for example, with the Bored Apes, just because they're easy to reference. If you buy a Bored Ape, you have the complete copyright to that specific ape. You can do whatever you want with it. So a good example of that is Snoop Dogg and Eminem bought 2 apes, one each. And now in a lot of their music videos, they're using those specific apes in their music videos because they can, and they don't need to get Yuga Labs permission to do that.
Because it was part of the purchase of the
Yes.
entity. Right. So it comes down to contracts, excitingly. So we are pretty much over time. Can we wrap up by giving one quick tiny weeny tip if people are thinking about what would be the next step to take? And also, because we haven't really touched on it too much, risk, like something to avoid or be aware of.
Do you want to start this?
Well, I suppose my little tidbit is you can't fall off the floor, so you might as well just start. I mean, right now the Web3 space is a very grey area, but that's where the opportunities lie, and you can get away with a lot of stuff until there's some sort of policy or legal interventions, which is probably not going to happen for a while. But yeah, and so because of that, so that kind of feeds into the idea of risk. Yeah, just like the biggest risk you can take is not to take that risk. If you're going to take that risk, do it in Web3.
I feel like you skirted the second one there, but okay, we'll take it in the interest of time.
I think it's the web. NFTs is a small part of a larger piece, and so you can't really think about one without thinking about the other. And I think what Web3 and the metaverse allows us to do is to create infinite opportunities. In terms of risk, there will always be risk in anything. Any action any person takes will always have a certain amount of risk attached to it. However, when it comes to things like experiential NFTs or physical and digital NFTs, most times, most fans aren't buying it for the monetary value of the resale, they're buying it for the experience itself. So in that case, really there's a minimal risk because the authenticity is guaranteed by the blockchain. It's only if you're buying speculative assets, I'm going to go into technical financial terms, if you're going to buy speculative assets that might not be or are regulated, then that's where there's an element of risk. As Des specifically highlighted, there's situations where people will invest in something thinking it's going to have a certain value, and there's a rug pull, and it turns out they haven't bought what they thought they bought, and the money's disappeared. But if you're buying authentically for a specific experience, whether that's to be close to an artist, to buy music from an artist, so on and so forth, there's minimal risk in that.
I say go for it. Everyone in the room, go for it. Actually, let yourself go, immerse yourself in it, but collaborate. I think that's the big thing. Collaborate with people that know. I mean, these guys know 10 times harder. They're just like creating art, but then they'll say, do this way.
He's too modest.
So collaborate, well, yeah, absolutely, be honest. Collaborate with really good people and take your work to the next level.
Thank you. I'd just add to that, because I am the lawyer, on the risk thing, collaborate, educate, okay? You've mainly spoken about maybe monetary risks, but the other risk is being sued for copyright infringement because you didn't have the rights to make an NFT in the first place and you thought you did. Honest mistake to make. So just educate yourself about your rights and what you can and can't do, and if you do decide to jump in, I think leaning towards collaboration. If you are focusing on your art, it's fine if you don't know the legal side of what you can and can't do, but find out. Because there are legal risks in terms of rights management, so just to be aware of that. But other than that, just thank you very much to everyone for the panel. We'll be around if anyone does have any further questions, but I hope you found that interesting.
So just a short break and then we're back for the scoring contest.